This is going to be a very beginner-friendly guide to Destruction Warlock in patch 11.0.5. Hi, I'm Javier. I do very beginner-friendly guides. If you're new here, let's jump straight into it. Intellect is your friend. Higher and higher eye level is, of course, going to be the way to go with this build. Secondary stats don't matter too much if you're only playing at a very casual or beginner or even intermediate level. Eye level is always going to be, better. Critical strike, more damage, of course. Haste, everything happens quicker. Mastery, your spells deal more damage, plus a random amount up to X amount. And then versatility increases damage and healing done, but also reduces how much damage you take. We're going to be looking at both Mythic Plus, so AoE, and also single target builds. Let's start off with the single target build here. So, again, talent builds are in the description, of course. We are going with Diabolist. Diabolist doesn't really do anything that we need to really be thinking about too much. The keystone talent here is that when we're casting a lot of our spells, it grants us a diabolic ritual. When that expires, we then gain Demonic Art, causing our next spell, or one of our main spells, to summon an Overlord that deals a devastating attack. And it basically all goes into that. Where at the end, summoning a Pit Lord causes your next Chaos Bolt to become Ruination, which will call down a demon-infested meteor, doing loads of damage. So it's basically, the hero talents here are worked into the rotation that I'm going to be showing you. And it just may be changing things kind of in the background, but not front of house, shall we say. So what we're going to actually do, left is top priority, right is lowest priority. So, number 1, Immolate. Put this on your target at all times. Burns the enemy, causing fire damage and an additional amount over 20 seconds. Periodic damage generates 1 soul shard fragment and has a chance to generate an additional 1 on critical hits. What are soul shards? On my weak aura here, you can see I've got 3.8 and then it's going to keep going up because of the Immolate. These are my soul shards. Certain spells are going to, or a lot of our spells are going to actually generate soul shards. And then we're going to be spending our soul shards, namely with Chaos Bolt here. And that uses 2 soul shards to cast. And that is pretty much how Destruction Warlock works in its simplest form. So, number 1, keep Immolate up on your target at all times. After that, use Shadow Burn on cooldown. And because it's instant, you can use it while moving as well. Blast the target for damage, gaining 100% critical strike on targets that have 30% or less health. Use it at any amount of health, however. This also restores soul shards. If we're about to cap on soul shards, let's say 4 and above, then use your Chaos Bolt next to make sure you're not capping on them. Unleashes a devastating blast of chaos, dealing damage. Damage is further increased by a critical strike chance. And that is again how we're spending our soul shards. After that, we have Soulfire. If we have less than 4 soul shards, we want to use Soulfire. And that's because it guarantees us 1 soul shard. So we use Soulfire here, burns the enemy's soul, dealing fire damage, and it applies Immolate as well. So keep Immolate up on the target at all times, but be aware you can actually do it with Soulfire. Then we have Conflagrate. We've got 2 charges of this, and we don't want to cap on charges. Triggers an explosion on a target, and reduces the cast time of your next Incinerate or Chaos Bolt by 30% for 10 seconds. This is called Backdraft, okay? Where it makes your next cast quicker. Ideally, we then use that on a Chaos Bolt. You can see how much quicker it is when we have a Backdraft stack. Oh, look, and here's our demons. This is from our hero talents. It's very cool. So, again, don't let the charges cap out at 2 charges, because it's a waste of kind of like time, I guess you could say. Just letting it sit there and not be recharging. Then we have Chaos Bolt again on the priority list. So we're using it here to make sure we're not capping on soul shards. We're using it here to main a buff called Eradication on our target. So if I use Chaos Bolt, on the target, you see here, Eradication, damage taken from the Warlock, increased by 5%. Oh, look, and here, our next Chaos Bolt is now Ruination, and again, that is because of our hero talents. After that, I actually just slip a spell in, because I forgot a spell. We actually want Cataclysm next, and you can basically use this to cool down a Cataclysmic Meteor, doing damage to everyone in the area, and applying them with Immolate as well. Use that pretty much on cooldown, but as a lower priority, and use it to reapply Immolate. And then we want to use Conflagrate again. So again, this is a priority list. So I'm saying use Conflagrate here to make sure it's not capping on charges. Use it here to make sure we have the buff on our target, or the debuff, which is this here, Conflagrate. Damage taken from Immolate, Incinerate, Conflagrate, Soulfire, and Channel Demon Fire is increased. So we're using it at this point to make sure we have that debuff up as much as possible. And then, if you can, when that debuff is up, try and use things like Soulfire, because obviously it will do more damage. And then, apart from that, we're just going to be using Incinerate here as a filler spell to generate Soul Shards. Let's go through it again. Maintain Immolate at all times. Use Shadow Burn on cooldown. Use Chaos Bolt to make sure we're not capping on Soul Shards, which we're not at the moment. Let's go on. Use Soulfire on cooldown. Use Conflagrate to make sure you're not capping on charges. Use Chaos Bolt to make sure there's Eradication up on the target. That's this debuff. Then use Cataclysm on cooldown. Use Conflagrate to make sure the debuff is up. And then use Incinerate as a filler. And then we're nearly capping on charges, so we're going to use our Chaos Bolt. And that is literally the rotation. So let's go through some of the important talents that we have here. And you can start to see how things are coming together a bit more. Backdraft is important. This is the talent that means your Conflagrate reduces the cast time of your next Incinerate, Chaos Bolt, or Soulfire. We've already spoken about that, but that's where it is. We've got Roaring Blaze here, where Conflagrate increases the damage you do. Again, we've just spoken about that. And then there's also Indiscriminate Flames. Backdraft, so when you use Conflagrate, that increases the damage of your next Chaos Bolt and increases the critical strike chance of your next Incinerate or Soulfire. Sometimes you'll notice that your Soulfire has a ribbon around it, like little yellow dots going around it. And that's from here, Decimation. When your direct damaging abilities deal a critical strike, they have a chance to reset the cooldown of Soulfire and reduce the cast time of it by 80%. We're using it on cooldown anyway, so if you ever see it proc, obviously we'd be using it anyway, because we're using it on cooldown. So that's kind of already baked into the rotation, but it's something you should be aware of. We have this one here, which is a cooldown, Summon Infernal. Summon an Infernal, doing loads of damage. It's going to serve you for 30 seconds. And then there's a chance that we get more coming out. And that is this cooldown here. And you could just pretty much use this on cooldown to summon your Infernal. That is your main cooldown as a Destruction Warlock. And those are pretty much the main ones you need to know about. So again, let's just go through it really quickly. Keep Immolate up at all times. Use Shadow Burn on cooldown. If you're about to cap on Soul Shards, use your Chaos Bolt. Use Soulfire whenever you can. So here's going to be a really quick version. See, it's much quicker. Don't cap on Conflagrate charges. Use Chaos Bolt to keep up the Eradication buff. Use Cataclysm on cooldown. Use Conflagrate to keep up the debuff. And then use Incinerate as a filler. And that is literally the rotation for a Destruction Warlock in single target. It really is quite straightforward. Let's move on now to the AoE version of the build. And you're going to see not much is really going to change here. Only a few key talents. So you can see here the talents that are changing. We lose Cataclysm, and we're going to get Inferno. Rain of Fire increases damage by 20. Sorry, the Rain of Fire damage is increased by 20%, and its Soul Shard cost is reduced, and things like that. Now, we don't have that many things we're going to be using in AoE. It's quite a basic one. Maintain Immolate on your main target. And if you've got any other targets that are going to live for a little bit, I'd say maybe sort of 8 to 10 seconds or longer. If they're going to live for longer than that, then try and put Immolate up on all of those as well. Then we're actually not using Chaos Bolt. We're using Rain of Fire. Cools down a Rain of Hellfire, and it will do fire damage in this entire area. Again, use this in an AoE situation rather than Chaos Bolt, and that is how we're spending our Soul Shards. We can use Conflagrate to generate Soul Shards, as well as, of course, putting the debuff up on the target. That means we do more damage to them. And then we're using Incinerate to generate Soul Shards as well. And that's really all we're going to be doing in an AoE situation. It's honestly a bit too simple at the moment, but that is really all we need to actually be doing. If you're looking for something a bit more complex, I love Affliction and Demonology. Destruction is the much easier and simpler rotation of the three. Demonology is fairly simple, I would say. You're just summoning all demons in a priority list, and then using a tyrant to empower them, basically, and spending soul shards on Hand of Gul'dan, basically meteors. And then Affliction is all about using loads of different dots or damage over time spells and putting up those different debuffs on the target, which is, in my opinion, the most interesting and fun rotation. And none of them are that difficult either. If you're looking at things like utilities for Destruction Warlock, one thing, use a Fell Hunter as a pet, because it's got this ability here, Spell Lock, which you can actually drag off your pet bar onto your bar. And this is your interrupt, okay? That's actually how you interrupt as a Warlock. We have Burning Rush, which is your movement speed ability, and that is actually going to speed you up, but it's also going to hurt you, and that's toggleable. Okay, so don't have it on forever, because you will end up dying. We have things like Curses, reducing a target's movement speed. We've got Curse of Tongues, Curse of Weakness. Dark Pact is a really good defensive. It sacrifices 20% of your health, but shields you for 200% health, which is really good. Fear literally fears our targets. Drain Life is a good utility. Causes damage to the enemy and heals you for 500% of the damage done. And then we've got things like Soulburn, which basically will consume a soul shard and will empower your other utility spells, like Health Funnel, restores even more health and reduces damage taken by your pet. Health Stones increases the maximum health they deal and heal, and things like that. And we've got Soul Stones, which is basically a battle res. And yeah, I would say those are the main ones. What I would say is if you are new to the spec or as a Warlock, then once you're comfortable with the rotations and had some practice, just have a look through your spellbook and have a look through the talents here and have a look at every single one and just see how they all work together. You know, I've gone through the really important talents with you for the rotation, etc. But of course, there are a lot of other talents that, you know, might just do little things like this one, Ember Storm. Increases the damage done by your fire spells and reduces the cast time of your Incinerate. Like, you don't really need to know about that to do the rotation. It's not changing anything. But, you know, I do think it's good that you have a look at all the different talents and see how they come together to form the basis of our rotation. If you want to get my UI, which is, as you can see here, by the way, including my whole Elf UI profile, Details profile, Voodoo profiles, and everything like that, you can get that on my Patreon, which also unlocks a VIP channel in Discord. And in there, you can get one-on-one help from me and things like that, should you wish to. Check out the playlist you now see on screen, as I do every single spec for every single patch.